All right. Hello to anyone who might be listening. I am uh, trying to put out some videos or content, or whatever you call it here. This is very disorganized, at least for now. But my goal in doing this is to help me organize my thoughts a little more. I have been thinking about these things for almost a decade now, and trying to communicate them to myself and others, and I have yet to find a good medium. Writing is not my strength, so I'm trying to figure out maybe speaking to myself will help me communicate this better to myself so I can communicate to other people. My goal here is to talk about some ideas I have around money, education, and government, and how our world needs to change and develop some sort of new system to help function in this way. And so I want to talk about some high level things here and put out a couple more videos or recordings here over hopefully the next couple weeks to help hash this out a little bit more. But like I said here, my overall goal in doing this is to really be able to communicate this better to myself. If other people find it valuable, that's a good thing, because that's my ultimate goal in the long run, but in the short term, just to myself. The reason I'm doing this now is I've been thinking about this for a long time. I need to start, I've been writing it to myself. I need to communicate a little bit better. And I do think that a time's coming very soon, especially with this pandemic going on, that we're going to need some new incentive systems, some new ranking systems, some better ways to understand what we really want and what value can provide others. I think the age-old debate between capitalism and communism is a little bit outdated, and we need to look at some new models, perhaps, and without getting out too wishy-washy of some of the really scattered things. But what can we do that's actually going to work and could be possible? And so I think, again, with the way the world is going right now, I do think we need to make some changes. It seems like a lot of people are starting to see if we can just give universal basic income to everyone. Well, where's that money actually coming from? Why couldn't we do that before? And people are starting to see the limitations of fiat currency, and that we have some strange ways of looking at that. Bitcoin has obviously become much more mainstream in the last, let's say, 4 years or so. Um, so I think people are starting to question what money is and why do we use them? Why do we use that, right? Why do certain countries have more money than others? Why do certain people have more money than others? Um, Ideally, it should be because they provide more value. I think it's pretty clear to most people now that that is not always the case. That someone may not actually be providing very much value to individual or society, yet they still make a lot of money. And so, is that a good system? I'm not saying that's fair or should be fair. I don't think life is fair, but is that a good system, right? Could we build something better that take in more areas of people being satisfied or higher quality life for other people, for the society in general? The second thing, which I spent a lot of time thinking about, probably from 2013 through 2016, was really focusing on the education system and seeing, what is the purpose of education? And my end kind of judgment has been that the purpose of education is to rank and sort people who then can go get jobs, and those jobs are what give you money, and money gives you the opportunity to purchase certain things, which creates a certain lifestyle, which in many cultures and subcultures, I guess I'm not sure if that's the right word, but some certain areas provides a certain status symbol. And so a lot of this is all about status, right? Money is just status. Education is about status. Oh, you went to Harvard. If you're interviewing someone for, let's say, a job that's above manual labor, one person went to Harvard, one person went to community college. I would be willing to make a wager that you're more likely to at least interview the person who went to Harvard. Why? Because that's a social signal. It says something, right? And so that's what I think a lot of education is about. When you're applying to get into Harvard, they look at what school did you go to, what rank did you have in that class at that school, what extracurriculars did you have, who are your parents. These are things that are going to dictate whether you get into Harvard or not. And a lot of this education could even formulate down to parenting itself, and that parents choose to live in certain types of neighborhoods or can only afford to live in certain types of neighborhoods. Therefore, they go to certain types of schools, they're around certain types of people, and this makes a bit of a difference. So please pardon the AC or heat kicking on here if there's a bit of background noise, but I'm going to continue along. The third kind of piece here that I've been thinking about for a while is really government, and necessarily what is the best form of government? How's it failing? How's it working? There's communism, there's democracy, there's all different shapes and sizes, socialism. I think there's probably got to be some other thing out there that could make a bit of a difference, and really what is the purpose of government, at least for me, and what I'm saying right now, which may or may not be accurate or my full opinion, just what I'm thinking at the top of my head is that, one of the key points of government is to really apply, rule of law, and that there are certain, behaviors or things we want to encourage people with, and you can do that with incentives, right? So having certain types of incentives is a way to encourage people to do things based on the incentives you're giving them, or encourage them not to do certain things. And some countries provide lots of incentives, some countries provide very few incentives, some provide lots of, let's say, negative incentives, some provide very little negative incentives, right? And so there are different ways to perhaps tweak that to perform or create performances that we would rather see. And so I think at a high level here, what I'm really looking to do is eventually at some point I want to build a system. I recently read something about not building a product, but building a system. Products always have to be improved. Systems are something that hopefully is structurally sound. I do want to build a strong, structurally sound system here at some point. I think the idea of being able to just, I think the guy's name, certain types of people who have ideas and they write about these ideas and they speak about these ideas, but then the idea never gets implemented. Why? Because in my opinion, they haven't gone and done the idea, right? They talk about this utopian society or something, but they don't actually build a product or system that helps lead towards that utopian society. And not that utopian society is possible or even the goal, but it's better to do something as opposed to just talk about something. So I do think that at some point, sooner rather than later, I want to go start building the system and have a team and a group of people around me who can help me build this system. Before I do that, and I think as part of these video series here is trying to formulate this idea better. I think one of the best ways to perhaps formulate this idea and spread the idea is to perhaps write a science fiction story at some point, kind of explaining what the future could look like if said system was implemented. What would the world kind of look like? Maybe a what's the opposite of dystopian 1984? So something that can actually be good, called 1985, or maybe 2085. So I think those are kind of two short-term goals that I want to work on is communicating this idea out to more people. And I think using a science fiction story might be a way to do that. And then hiring or bringing on a team of people to help me build this actual system to really, mix money, education, and government, because I do think this can be a bit of a future. So this kind of long run shout out here, but I think what I'm going to jump into today a little bit is talking about really how I've kind of come to this perhaps, or what necessarily is the problem. And so actually it took me a long time. This is probably one of the bigger challenges, is finding a clear explanation of what is the problem. And I think one of the best ones I've seen out there so far is the Center for Humane Technology, and I believe this was started by, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Tristan Harris and a couple other partners in crime with him. And so really the idea here of what they're saying, their website is actually fairly decent, where it talks about, breaking down the problem and what this is. I would highly recommend listening to I at least listen to a fair number of the Tim Ferriss podcasts. He has an interview with Tristan that is fairly enlightening, in my opinion, of really the problem. And I think part of this is that over the years, we've created technology, and for those who are concerned about artificial intelligence, I'm not as concerned about as I used to be. I do think it's still something that will see some big changes in the future, but we may not see it for much longer than most people anticipate. But either way, AI is becoming very powerful. It's able to predict things and do things much faster than we can. It's able to manipulate our emotions to get us to buy. It knows our habits way faster than we do, especially the subconscious ones. And so, these are things that we've basically created a entire industry of technology where people and organizations are incentivized and also legally responsible to create shareholder value. And to do that, they need to make sure that they are, getting their customers to buy more things. So why would you not invest in artificial intelligence that's able to, subconsciously nudge your customers to take advantage of, your program, meaning buy your product. And so this creates an addiction economy. And so so the Center for Humane Technology break this down a lot, in that we're all addicted to technology. There's a lot of mental health challenges, especially in teenagers. There's such wide polarization; it's easy to be manipulated. So there's lots of challenges here, and he likes to use the analogy, I think, somewhere down here, about the race to the bottom of the brainstem, and that we're really going at some very low subcontial, ape almost pressures here. And we need to, and the reason this is happening, it's not that tech companies are necessarily bad. It's just they're trying to keep us, on their platforms. They're trying to keep us buying their products. Uh, they have a responsibility. This is just how the incentives are currently set up. And so, you know, this I think is doing a great job of describing what the problem is, at least on a tech side. I do think there's lots of ways this could be additionally brought in when we're looking at, again, the education system and how is it forcing people to really be ranked in areas that are just kind of repeating the past. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, for lack of a better expression. And that, lower income families are typically going to live in lower income school districts, who are going to typically have less qualified teachers, who are going to, less likely to go to school, university, and they're less likely to graduate university, and they're not going to do as well. Higher income families live in better school districts. They're more likely to go to more elite universities. The top tier companies only recruit at more elite universities, and therefore just kind of repeats the cycle. And so really education is nothing about learning. It's more about creating a network and ranking people. So I think that can be added in. Also, there's tons of problems, and I don't want to go off into conspiracy land about who's the Fed and who owns the Fed and those types of things. But the idea of fiat currencies are very interesting, in that it's really just something that's made up. It is something we can really say, and perhaps there would be a better way to track value that people have added to society. So I think this is a really great place to kind of start to kind of get some general feedback on at least the technology and incentives that are currently in place that are leading us down a road necessarily none of us want to go down. So how do we adjust that? A couple ways of thinking about this also, in some books I would recommend. There's one called Attention Merchants. It's pretty quick, easy read, mostly about historical. This isn't really anything new. Something, in my opinion, that I've thought about for a while and tried to write, but not very clearly, is about I really believe that attention is the root of everything. Um, Everyone wants attention, and that's what we're craving for, right? When your phone buzzes, it's attention. You look at it because, oh wow, someone wants to put their attention on me. There's a notification that wants to put their attention on me. When you're speaking with someone, you look them in the eye because you're giving them their attention. That's how you know you have their attention. TV stations are saying news or sports or something that grabs your attention, right? And they capture your attention, and then they sell your attention, right? Because they have this exciting sport that you want to watch, or exciting or scary news program that you're paying attention to, and then they're going to have a commercial break, and they're going to sell your attention to other people. So they have the whatever vacuum cleaner or a pillow company come on and try to sell you their product, because they have the news or sports station has already captured your attention, so they're then reselling that attention, right, to someone else. And um, that tends to be a big thing. I would even say that love is really just attention, in that when you truly love someone, they, or the person you love the most in your life, that is someone that you are more willing to spend attention on than anyone else on this planet or in your life, right? And so, I think that attention is one of the root of main things, and this goes back to the previous thing over here, where it really is. It's just attention. They're attracting and capturing attention. That's the goal here. That is the real value. Gold is not the most valuable thing on the planet. Attention is the most valuable thing on the planet. You can't focus on more than one thing at a time. As much as people think multitasking is true, it's not, right? You can only be fully attentive on one thing. So I think this is a great kind of history of that, and kind of some of the challenges around the tech. And then these next two books are really kind of painting a picture of what perhaps the future could be like. So this one is Finite and Infinite Games. I've only read it once. I should probably read it 20 more times before I actually figure out what they're talking about. But the main gist that I have understood is that there are two perhaps ways of viewing the world. And I would say, in my opinion, 98% of us view it at the finite level. A couple people on this planet view it as an infinite level. And I think the idea behind it is that finite is more of like game theory, win-lose. Infinite is more about win-win, is kind of the most simplistic way to say it. Or ideally, like I think another analogy for infinite games is the idea of improv, where you want to, if someone says, hey, look at that hat over on the hat rack, and and there's no hack there, but obviously they're imagining that the other players in the improv need to continue to use that, right? They can't say, oh no, that's not a hat. They have to agree with it and then play off of that, add to it, right? So the idea is to create win-win and making sure that people take a mindset that the idea of an economy, the idea of education, the idea of money, the idea of a government is to always be kind of playing and continuing the game and improving, and not necessarily fighting for limited resources, but saying, okay, yes, there are limited resources, but how can we find there's let me say it again, there is limited resources, correct, but there are unlimited ways we could use and divide those resources, right? And the limitation is human ingenuity, and that we are truly unlimited. We could continue to think about new ways to use a pencil, right? We can think of many, many new ways. We can find many, many ways to build a pencil, right? And so if the challenge is climate change, or the challenge is global hunger, there are tons of ways we could think about and brainstorm huge list of ways to excuse me, solve these problems. But we're not necessarily doing that, right? So we could. And so finite games are more about win-lose, in that, I'm going to take advantage of this, I'm going to use this resource, and you're not going to be able to use this resource, and perhaps, a little bit like that. I need to spend some more time trying to summarize this book. I haven't done that yet very well, but has been a very impactful book for me in the last year or so. The other book here, which is a more of a classic one, and I think most people are very familiar with the terminology of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I think this is kind of part of my opinion of how kind of the future system could look a little bit, where you take something like this. It's interesting how Maslow's ideas were very popular at the beginning of his introduction, and they died off, and they seem to have a bit of resurgence here in the last couple of years, or maybe last decade or 20 years. I think something that, in my opinion, is lacking here a little bit is the idea of how do we take actions with this, and so I think hopefully in subsequent videos I'll talk more about this. But I believe part of the system that we could create is really almost a system or app, for lack of a better word, where you can come in and type in what are your priorities, right? So for me personally, I'm very lucky in the sense that I have a warm house, I have a computer I can record this on. A lot of my basic needs are taken care of, but I do have certain basic needs that I would like to take care of better, or really creating a system where you describe what do you want, because I think part of the challenge is a lot of people don't necessarily know what they want. And so using this kind of framework of, okay, you need air, you need water, you need food, you need shelter, you need love, you need education, you need transportation, you need, these different types of things. We could build out and list out all these different categories that people could be necessary or could possibly want. And you can list out a full spectrum or map, pattern, hierarchy or pyramid of these are all the possible things you could want in life. Right, and then going through and typing in the different taste for that. So there's another book I didn't pull up here, but Distinction by Pierre Bourdieu, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, talking about how it's different taste, right? So I prefer this tea over that tea. I prefer water over, Pepsi. I prefer to breathe oxygen as breathing water. That's a very standard one, right? I trust the person who is a nurse to babysit my child more than I trust the truck driver to babysit my child, right? So there are tastes in life, and some of those can go from very basic things like I prefer to breathe air over water, all the way down to, oh, the 1859 wine is much better than 1896 or something like that, right? So you can have a full spectrum of taste there, and if people are able to write this down very clearly for themselves, it'll be good, because then perhaps the way the economy could be structured is that this is kind of something you set out. Today it's 11:59. I'm getting kind of hungry. A sandwich sounds very good to me, and then that would go out into the system, and someone who would perhaps be in a certain territory nearby says, oh, I have a sandwich. You bought sandwiches for me before. Let's bring you over a sandwich, right? So I think really the idea is being able to match supply and demand of what it is people really want and what people can really offer. So I think combining this in some way with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think could be a very interesting system. So I'm going to do a quick summary and then stop there for tonight. I think for me overall, this has been somewhat helpful to listen to. I'm sure I'll want to come back and listen to this a couple times just to kind of sort out my ideas a little bit better. But I do think that the overall idea, for me at least, is to be able to continue to try to communicate this to myself, to other people, to help, write out perhaps a science fiction story, create a bit of a system that we could use to help, slowly transition people to a new system that is a new type of money, a new type of education, a new type of government. So we'll go into more details later, but thank you all for taking the time. If anyone listened to this, and we'll go from there. Thank you.